Yo, this is the Ancient Texan. It's May 25th. We have an easy one this morning that kind of demonstrates the difference of our rights and rights of other people. A guy named Roman Protasevich, pardon the way I say his name. He's a journalist. He ran an internet company where it criticized his government. His government's Belarus, and it's run by a guy, Lusank, Alexandria Lusankio. I'm not saying his name right. That's a problem with me. I'm never going to get a job as a newscaster. I can't pronounce names very well. Well, he was going to a nearby country, I think. And he was on a plane flying, 1,000 miles, and agents got on the plane with him, obviously secret agents. And once they were in flight, they diverted his flight and took him to Belarus and took him into custody. And he had a statement after that was probably scripted. Looked in decent shape, although there's some conjecture that, his nose may be broken and other minor details. The Belarus passed some laws making it, basically unlawful to criticize the government on the internet or anywhere else. The European Union took action, and now you can't fly out of Belarus over any country in the area, but they can go east and fly into Russia. I guess land at the airport there, change planes, and then go to wherever they're going. Other airlines are instructed not to fly over Belarus. Lukashenko has said he didn't cheat in the election, but he's been there a long time and pretty much doesn't allow any freedom of speech. And he considers this guy, Roman, to be a terrorist for what he does. Kind of like we consider groups in, if you're a Palestinian group like Hamas, you're considered a terrorist. You can argue that one way or another, but it's, people can declare a person a terrorist, and I'm not sure there's any definite rules on what makes a terrorist. I think it's country by country. So anytime you hear that someone's a terrorist, you might ask, what's the definition? Like, for instance, would our people that rebelled against Great Britain and threw tea into the harbor, would they be considered terrorists? No. Lukashenko is a terrorist, and it's not inconceivable that he could be put to death for being a journalist. You might also ask yourself how some of the journalists were treated as enemies when Trump was in power. Kind of the same stuff my mind. Either believe in freedom of speech and free journalism, or you don't. Now, where do you cross the line? Where is hate speech, and where is, asking for someone to riot or storm the Capitol? Where's the boundary there? I don't think it's that simple, but it sure as hell is important. Story number 2. I watched an immigrant from Honduras. He walked in a parade to try to get higher wages because he got $16 a day. Him and his wife both got fired for walking in that parade, kind of like the way we treated unions in the early day. His father was killed by gangs in Honduras. So without money, no way to support himself, his dad killed from gangs, he took off to the U.S. But Biden's asked Guatemala to use their troops to stop people at the Honduras-Guatemala border. So he got stopped there, but he circumvented those troops by going through the mountains and tried to connect back up with his friends to cross the Guatemala-Mexico border, which is again was set up with Biden's prompting. Mexico set up troops to stop people coming up from Honduras. You don't get to America, you don't get to apply for refugee status. So Biden's done it, a little quieter way and a little more professionally and, a little smoother. But he's essentially stopping people from coming in with the military. Not the military on the U.S.-Mexico border, but borders before you get there. Not sure that's a whole lot different than what Trump did. Maybe Biden's treating the people better after they do get in this country. But it's definitely not in the spirit of being a country that people can go to when they're being abused. You might also ask, what is the U.S. drug policy? What effect does it have on Honduras? Where do the gangs in Honduras get their money? How much of the problem in Honduras is our drug problem just radiating out? How much of our problem is caused by the war on drugs? It's not the war on drugs. It's the war on people that are doing drugs. It is a war on people addicted to drugs. Word choice, it means everything. It means that you can attack these people, you can abuse them, you can put them in jail. It kind of justifies from the get-go when you use the word war, how you're going to treat somebody. They're your enemy. They're not a fellow human. They're an other. Think how our word choice on war affects this kid. He's like 22 years old, wife, a couple of kids, his father murdered, laid off because he tried to get more than $16 a day. Think how it affects his life simply from the word choice of war on drugs. I'm having trouble saying it. How do your values line up here? Do you think that's consistent with your values? Do you believe there should be a war on drugs? Second, do you believe we should let refugees come into this country? Turns out our population in 2020 is actually in decline. We're going to need laborers. We're getting older. Immigration is the only thing that's kept us from having a shrinking population. But whether you think we should be our brother's keeper or not depends on your values. Depends on your values if you think we should take responsibility for the effect of our drug policy in Latin America. It depends on your values whether you think we should help the government in Honduras, which is probably more corrupt than our government, create job opportunities and help them secure their country from violence. Also, most of the guns in Honduras, guess where they come from? Does the U.S. bear any responsibility for that? What do you say with your values? Yes or no? It's a pretty simple question. So in that story, to me, there's half a dozen values, and how you decide on what should be done depends on your values. It's your call. It's your values. Third story number 3. George Floyd. It's been a year. Michael Brown's been 7 years. George Floyd's policeman got convicted of murder or something. Manslaughter, a couple of things. I don't think he's been sentenced yet. So we got all that problem behind us. Yeah, sure. First, our country did end the Indians. We had slaves. We abused the Chinese immigrants coming over. We put Japanese in internment camps. We went back to abusing the blacks after they were free. Now we're back to having violence against Asians. There's wealth disparity, asset differences. They have different amount of assets depending on what race you're in. We're still hung up on the myth of race in this country. We all have a sprinkling of different percentages of all the races that exist on the planet. We all come from a common ancestor a couple 100,000 years ago. We're all just blends of the same thing. And yet we believe you have certain physical traits from the blend that you got, you're inferior. It's a deep-seated belief. Like the world took people a million years, 200,000 years for the modern man to believe the earth is round instead of flat, and there's still a flat earth group. Things that are not true persist for a long, long time. I think we change things, but it's amazingly slow. And it usually kind of changes little steps between generations. Some people change even when they're old dudes like me. And I'd like to be considered, I'd be proud to be considered one of those people. Who's stopping changes right now? There's a lot of people. I mean, you can point to white supremacists, white racists, a lot of the Republican Party. But you also have to look at policemen. They say they have to be fast in making their decision. It's a dangerous jobs, and too much thinking, they end up dead. There's some truth to that. We've got a truckload of guns. And by the way, uh, National Rifle Association is getting rid of that Pierre guy, probably. That's been stealing a lot of money from the organization, and he's put it into bankruptcy, mainly trying to keep himself out of jail. But that's a whole nother story. A lot of values involved there. But here with George Floyd, do you believe that you have a certain amount of bias in you that works against Black people, against Hispanics, against whatever flavor you don't like? Well, I do R&D, and you can take the best researcher in the world, and if he believes something is true, it's very easy to pick and choose the data you collect and throw away data almost without realizing you're doing it. Just kind of like your brain tricking you to go get another candy bar. Uh, it finds some exception, some reason, some weird reason for doing something or not doing something. Their brain is tricky. It is in there, and it's it's your native survival system. It's there watching out for changes. It doesn't like changes. It likes things to go the same as it's always been. It doesn't like discomfort. It pushes you to keep the status quo. That's kind of a universal rule. The status quo is maintained by your body's survival system. You see things that are changing, it makes you uncomfortable, and you find a reason not to. You find an observation that supports your point of view. You may ignore 20 other observations, but you find an observation that justifies your story. It's human nature, and you really have to work at it to get rid of it. So, racism's been around a long time, and I suspect it will incrementally improve. The next generation will probably be a little better. Current generation, getting it to change. I'm all for it, but I think we're stuck with it for a while. At least we're stuck with it. We won't see the rate of change. It'll be small. Right now, to kind of prove that point, there's a George Floyd bill in Congress. It can pass the House, but it needs 60 votes in the Senate. Very tough to get 10 Republicans. Probably as tough as getting 10 Republicans to vote to impeach Trump. Not impossible, but very, very difficult. They've been working on it a year. We're not there yet. But keep the faith. We got to inch forward one inch at a time. You might take an inventory of yourself and see where you are on this, on your evolution. Do you even admit there might be a problem? That's kind of like step one. If you're not there, then you're like, in my mind, you're, at step zero. I'm kind of at step one. I, understand I've got problems. I'm not sure how hard I'm going to work to change any of those or to read books to understand them. I'm a little reluctant to define anything around race. I'd rather do it like if someone is not earning enough money for the job they're doing, then no matter what your race, I want to see changes made. Or if your group is disadvantaged into getting schools, or you get shot more, or something like that, I'd like to go at the root causes of those problems and attack the root causes as much as we can. And maybe racism is one of those problems, but that's a never shifting thing. Like right now, Asians seem to be getting the brunt of racism. I don't know if they passed the blacks or the Indians. But racism kind of shifts, and who's being abused. And I think you've got to attack the behavior. I think it's hard to attack something like racism, which is largely hidden, including reparations. I'm not inherently against that, but I just have a hard time imagining how one group, like the Asians who earn less money, they've been abused for a long time, but the Indians have been abused for a long time. How you help one group, the blacks in this instance, without causing harm to other groups. It's too complicated for me. Recently, there's been a law passed, a judgment made by the Supreme Court that said state of Oklahoma couldn't ignore the agreements they had with one of the Indian tribes around Tulsa. I don't remember which one it was. I like that kind of agreement. You got an agreement, you got to stick with it. Takes race completely out of it. That's story number 3. Okay, story number 4. There's a case in front of the Supreme Court. Kid off campus, they didn't make the cheerleading squad, and they got on one of the Snapchat or some modern social media system, and did a F-bomb against their school and against their coach and against their team. And apparently the Snapchat's supposed to disappear in 24 hours, but another student copied it and took it to the school. The school suspended the kid for, cussing. The school's argument is it doesn't matter if it's off campus. When it's on the internet, it comes on campus, and they have a right to discipline the kids. There's kind of an argument that their sentence was overly severe to suspend someone for a year over using a swear word off campus, or indecent language, whatever you want to call it. So Supreme Court got that and said, where does free speech end? And where does it begin? You step off campus, do you have free speech? On campus, you don't have free speech? Can you say F it or not on campus or off campus? Is a school too strict? The case has a whole bunch of can of worms. It's not a real clean case to decide the freedom of speech by students and the ability of, teachers and administration to control kids. But I'm sure most of you have an opinion. I think they came down too hard on the kids. So I think it's hard to say this is, you can make any kind of case for this, because you need a case where the punishment's appropriate and they do some, say something off campus and the school responds to it. I think to make a more general case, but that's the case the Supreme Court has in front of them. It sounds like they may still bow out and send it back down to the lower court, but it's complicated. Anybody that thinks that's simple has pretty simple thinking. I suspect if you're, one of the stronger conservative religions, you probably just think it's wrong to use the F-bomb, and you think the kids don't have a right to do that. I'm kind of on the lean on the free speech side of things, and I think I would side up with the kids on this one. But I don't have a strong opinion. I don't like that kind of language, and I use the word friggin', and I used it for decades before I even knew what it stood for, because it didn't stand for anything, just a word, frustration word for me. But I'm trying after decades to learn to quit saying that, because that's not the kind of person I want to be. I don't want to be so illiterate. As I get old now and I have trouble finding my words, I don't want to start using friggin' even more often. So I don't want to be the Supreme Court justice on that case. That sounds too hard for me, because I don't think I'm smart enough and know enough principles to sort that one out. And good luck with them on figuring that one out. Well, that's my 2 cents for today on what my values are about the different things happening in the news. I'd love to hear your opinion, your values, your principles. You can send them to me at wileyfoxes@gmail.com. If I get it, I'll give you an answer back on air. Wiley, WILEY, period, foxes, FOXES, @gmail.com. This is the Ancient Texan with the email of wileyfoxes@gmail. Figure that one out. Have a good day, and namaste.